today to our City Chat with Steve. We've got a great location. Thank you, Gerard, and the LD Fargo Library for hosting us. Take it away.
Well, it's like it's mentioned, I feel like Roosevelt today. I didn't bring my wheelchair, but I feel kind of special.
Fireside chat.
Yeah, the fireside chat. So we're moving into a busy phase in the next several years. We have a lot of projects going on this year, and we will have a substantial number of projects in the next 4 years. We have 9 plans in place that we use when we consider all these. These are plans that have been approved by the city council over the years. So you would look at things like the comprehensive plan, the transportation plan, the water plan, the sewer plan, the recreation plan, the bike plan, the pedestrian plan, and we have to look through those and try and incorporate all those concepts into all the projects that we do. And even the economic development plan, and we consider all those things when we look at that, emergency plans. And so those affect how we move forward from a staff point and what we bring forward to the council on a regular basis. So I kind of open that up and allow you to start asking questions of issues that you may feel are important. Does anybody have a question you want me to start on? Rob and I did a three-hour meeting Monday night on the trees on South Main Street. We went into great detail. I can tell you that we have every tree on the street on a set of plans, exactly where they fall within the scope of the whole plan. We've analyzed their condition and what condition they're in and what the issues are related to those trees. So we have spent almost as much time on considering trees as we have any other portion of the project, so that you know, and if you have any questions, we probably can answer a substantial amount of that information. I know Anita was at that meeting and spent a lot of time listening to us. Lead in the water is another topic that we've been working on a lot, so if anybody's interested in that, we have a lot of information on that.
Why don't you clarify again what was different about all the lead that was in the report about us versus Flint or other cities? Because it's a big difference, and people didn't know that.
Actually, it's probably not as significantly different as it sounded like in the papers. The papers made it sound like the water supply in Flint was contaminated. And Flint had moved from just being a city that purchased their water from the city of Detroit to organizing their own water district and trying to bring water from Lake Huron. It ended up that was going to take too long and was too expensive for their original point, so they went to taking it out of the local river. Yes. Now, normally surface water is less corrosive because it's already interacting with the air and most of the chemicals come out of it. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read all the details, but when they switched from the city of Detroit's water, which comes out of Lake Huron, and they went to the river water, it started to interact with the lead services and lead water systems within the houses. And they have over 8,000 lead water services. And their water became very corrosive and started to eat away at those services and ramped the lead in their system up more than it had been. And there can be a combination of issues that come out of that. I don't know if Detroit was adding a chemical that's used to line the water mains and services, and then Flint didn't with their new water district. So there's a lot of data that was left out of that. Like the city of Lake Mills the second that lead and copper became an issue, we went to a plan which is used by about 90% of the water systems in the United States, where we add Aquamag to our water at the wells, and that goes out and it lines the water system with a film, and that keeps the water from interacting with the metal. Since 2008. And when people talk about the system, we break it down into 3 different categories. First of all, we get our water out of deep wells, and there's absolutely no lead coming out of the water that we bring out of the ground. So if you initially said to me, is there lead in your water supply? I would say there is 0 lead in our water supply, because what's coming up out of the ground where we get our supply from has no lead in it. The city's water system, from the wells to all of your homes, is made up of a combination of either ductile iron cement line pipe or plastic. And so you're not getting any lead from that. From the ductile iron water main, which is usually somewhere between 6 and 12 inches in front of your home, to your property line is what we call a water service. And that can be a number of different types of material. It can be copper, it can be lead, it can be galvanized, or some sort of iron. Oh, probably from the time, the early 1900s until about 1960, lead was one of the most popular water services available. So, and the reason they was because it was flexible. So you could just roll it out, you could work around everything within the street and not have to worry very much about how much digging it took. Even though it was more expensive than the iron, it was easier to work with, took less time, and went in easier. So a lot of cities, particularly big cities in the early part of the century, used a lot of lead for their services. And they would run it to the property line, and then the property owner would run it into the house. So generally you can tell if you have a lead service at your property, because you can go in and the place where the line comes into the house just before the meter, you can test that, and if that's soft, it's lead. If it's hard, it's probably iron or copper. Then to top that off, when they started doing the copper systems in homes, they soldered them with lead solder. So now you have the copper system in your house contaminated with a solder that could potentially be leaching lead into your water system. And the longer water sits in your system, the more it leaches out, because it gets stale and becomes more and more corrosive. So usually in the city lines, it's moving pretty fast. It's not getting very stale, but you got a couple rooms in your house, bathrooms in your house that you only use once in a while. That water's probably getting pretty stale. The lead in that area is getting pretty high.
So if you do, you gotta flush your toilet and run your water, even in bathrooms that you don't use, if you
Right.
have any of this old stuff.
In 1980, lead solder became illegal, and nowadays, plastic is the norm within home construction, so you don't see much of it anyways, copper or lead or any solder. So it's changing out. They do recommend that if you have an older house, that you use cold water for drinking, and that you let your water supply run for a while, 30 to 60 seconds, so that you let that initial flush run. Most of your water fixtures are bronze, which has lead in it. So you want to make sure that that flushes out too, because It may be leaching into your water supply too. So from the standpoint of the city, we have very limited amounts of lead. Lake Mills is noted by the DNR to have 37 lead services. So we have to test twice a year 40 homes that are considered to be high risk. So we have to pick the worst homes in the worst location and test those. So when you see our tests coming out, if we have 4 of those homes that test bad, we're hitting the federal requirement for having to test. And if the test isn't done just exactly perfect for some reason, we're going to exceed. So, yeah, Bill.
That's what you publish in the Leader then, the test or analysis?
No, that's a consumer confidence report.
Okay.
And what they do is they're testing the well water, and then that's the consumer confidence report. They consider it kind of unfair to say that your water supply is not adequate if the problem is in a home. So they don't test that. But they do require us, and you can go on the DNR website and check out the lead testing data for how often we do it, how many samples we take.
I think that was the problem with Flint, is they didn't tell anybody about this. And the newspapers got a hold of it, of course, and
I'm not going to comment because, let me put it this way, we've been sending a public education notice every year since 2008. And everybody I talk to says, I've never seen that. Well, I'm glad you did, because it's pretty, most people say, I didn't know that. So the city is required as part, we put in the Aquamag, we do the public education notice every year, and we're required to replace a certain number of lead services every year. And I shouldn't say it that way. We have to replace an average of 3 lead services every year. So when we did Ferry Street between Lake and College, we replaced, I think, 12. We did a project over by Lakeview, and we replaced 3. And then we did, last year we did Brown and Cook, and then we did a couple on Madison and Fargo. And so in that time period, we replaced 29 services.
You're talking about from the street to the house?
Yes.
Not within the house?
Not within the house. Now, we have to record whether they did replace it within the house or not. And there were a certain number that did. I can tell you that the testing data goes along with it, and most of them were in the 5 to 15 parts per billion category, with 15 being the margin where you start to become concerned. And when I say that, they assume that you're getting a certain amount of lead from your water and a certain amount of lead from other environmental sources, because it usually takes up to quite a bit more lead than that to become a health hazard, but they're trying to look at your overall environmental impact. And but we did have 3 that were in 200 and above, one that was over 300. One of them replaced their whole system. The other 2 did not.
If people are buying a house, can they ask for that information? Is that readily available? Do they come to the city? How do they find out whether their internal stuff is replaced on the lateral?
I'm not sure.
That'd be a good thing for us to find out so we can put it on our website.
Not.
Because, a lot of people.
You have to look at the flip side, Diane. We have to test 40 homes a year. if we're putting that information out and making it so that they can't sell their homes, they're not going to let us
No,
test.
no. What I'm saying is, I don't want to say per house. I want to tell people where do they go to find out if the house they want to buy has had the lead taken care of.
Oh,
That's
yeah, they can go on, that information is available on the DNR site, but they can go to the water system too.
okay, so that is something, we could give them that much of that
Yeah,
information if they come and ask. So they call City Hall and they'll route them to,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, we can tell them that the
I don't want
lead's,
to get into that, or,
yeah.
no, that would not be good. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit.
Of the 29 services that we replaced, 12 were of the original 37. So we know that we still have 25 of the original 35 left. I anticipate when we do South Main Street and Mulberry Street, we will replace a lot more lead services. And we may not get down the original 25 any lower than we were. Probably, the greatest impediment to getting this problem taken care of is there are no records about who has lead services and who doesn't. So one of the federal requirements is that you're supposed to give the homeowner 45 days notice before you replace the water service and give them enough opportunity to see if they can put together a package to replace theirs. The problem is when you're digging down and replacing a water main and you find a lead service, you don't have 45 days to wait, and you've got to replace the whole water system now. And so that's kind of been the problem is that most of ours are accidental finds, and so it puts us in a bind with providing the required notice. So we've had to go through and negotiate some additional things with the DNR and how we handle those. But we are continuing to replace lead services, and we do recommend that people replace theirs. We do write into our contracts now where the contractor working for us will provide a special rate to the homeowner. So those are options available. But our total program is the Aquamag, the public education, and the replacement of a certain number of lead services annually.
Thank you.
How about the dam situation?
We took the bids yesterday,
Yeah, I've seen the paper that.
and we had 4 bids. 3 of them were within the range that we anticipated. One of them was extremely low.
Oh, good.
No. Someone says very good, but if someone isn't qualified to do the work, they may not understand and they may bid real low. So if you have a group of bids in this range and then you have one outlier way down here, then you start going,
What aren't they doing?
what aren't they doing?
Well, the council would look at that bid. That's part of what we do. We look and see.
Well, the engineer provides, the engineer goes and reviews their past work experience, their financial capability, and their equipment. Generally, when he's done with that, then he has a pretty good idea, and he'll make a recommendation to the council, and they have to provide us that data. So,
And we're not, as a council, we're not required to take the low bid. If we feel that there's a reason
yes.
to question the bid or to say there's something wrong here, we might not be able to put our thumb on it, but our gut feeling is like, no, this is not good. We can take the next bid and go with that instead, if
Right.
we have a reason.
What it is it's the lowest responsible
Responsible bidder.
And when the recommendation comes to the council, it's always based on what is the lowest responsible bidder. So the council doesn't have to look at all that individual data. That's already been done, and that's the recommendation that's brought to you.
Right. You know, a lot of, these guys put up a bond. And so if they look at it and realize that they screwed the bid up, they're not, we would go to them and say, do you want to withdraw your bid? Because they have before it's approved, they can withdraw their bid. And we would go through and kind of help them look at it and say, okay, do you want to really do this work? I think that I've reviewed some of their work, and they have done work, and they have been able to do it. But I want to make sure that they've included everything in the bid. The dam, it should start this summer, probably around June, maybe a little bit later. That always depends on the water levels. So it'll be one of the projects that'll start later in the year rather than earlier. Most of our street projects we try and get started as soon as possible.
Will the road be blocked off? Will the road be blocked off for any period of that construction?
No. The last time it was the diversion, where they had to pump the water from the mill pond all the way across the road. This time they have the manhole right there at the west edge of the sidewalk, where they will run from the mill pond into that, and then they can do all their construction around that. So no, they will have to put up cofferdams, and then they'll have to dry out everything behind the cofferdam so that they can pull out the old dam, pour all the new concrete, install all the equipment, and go. But they just pound in a cofferdam, put in their pumps, and start pumping from the mill pond over to that. And the road will stay open.
What visual will people see once the dam is complete, the dam project is complete? Visually, will there be any changes?
Well, I guess from a visual standpoint, it will have the Arts Alliance fencing and the wind mill. If you come up and look at it, it will be open. There will be a spillway. There will be kind of like a certain amount of water drop. So you will be able to experience kind of the waterfall and run through a rock channel. And so, yeah, there will be an open area that you can come down and watch.
Around the same place where the spillway?
Yes, yep, almost exactly in the same spot. Won't look quite the same, but it will be in the same area.
Will the lake water levels be able to be maintained throughout the project? There would be a period where it's significantly lower?
Well, I want to make sure that I answer this question correct, because lake levels, as Rob knows, vary on how much rain we get and how much sun we get and a lot of other things. When they put in that cofferdam, the water levels will be controlled by the pumps. So they have to stay within the levels required by the DNR, which we do too. So the lake levels will stay within what they normally have unless there's some other driving condition. And for us, it's been just about everything. Dry springs, real hot days take a ton of evaporation off, so it really varies from what kind of weather we experience.
So aside from the normal environmental conditions,
It'll be within the normal, yeah, it'll be within the norms.
Mention that we're looking at getting grant money to help the mill pond. Is that, you want to just kick that the right place? Because I didn't clarify that.
Well, we received grant money to do the dam. And the three bids we received, the low bid was $439,000. The high bid was $630,000. And then there were two bids in the $550,000 range. The grants that we receive for that pay 50% of the first $400,000 and 25% up to for the next $800,000 for the dam. So our contribution is going to be somewhere around, and there are a couple other things in that. That's the construction of the dam. There's going to be about $30,000 to $50,000 for SCADA work. That'll probably be done by someone like L.W. Allen.
What kind of work? What's it called?
SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Equipment.
Why
And-
don't we use an acronym?
Yeah, and we have it for our water system, our wastewater system, and our electric system. Everything's pretty much, data collection is a big part of it nowadays. So this will allow us to monitor lake levels, control the dam levels for that, and collect several other pieces of data that are important to the lake level and the DNR information that we have to collect on a daily basis. Yeah. So, and it'll also help with keeping the dam clean. So there's, right now we have to send someone out there every day to fork all that out, but this will help generate information, and then the dam has an automatic system that just dumps.
Which way does it dump? Is it a mill pond or right down the river?
Down the creek. We are looking at another grant for dredging the mill pond. So we are actually looking at a grant to help us do a study to determine when the mill pond will need to be dredged again, what the conditions are, what the soil conditions and contaminants in it are. We're already getting hydrogen sulfide, which means that we have an unusually large buildup of organic materials. And that generally means that you're getting real close to the need to dredge. And the channel's got a couple things in it that probably need to be pulled out. So we're looking at probably just getting a Chapter 30 permit next year to do the channel, and then data on when we should do the mill pond and how. There are a couple different methods. And then I think the report will also provide information on how to maintain the mill pond to keep it from needing to be dredged as often. There are some best management practices that can go into that. And, maybe we'll have Ed come in and run a boat where he takes out all the organic material on a regular basis or something like that. But there are several different methods. And even for, like now, we could probably set up a cofferdam, drain the mill pond, and let it just dry out for a while, and then that organic material sets and compacts, and then it stops forming the hydrogen sulfide and gives us some more time. So there are a couple practices that we can do to go before we have to do the dredging again. The dredging can cost between $650,000 and $5 million. And if you don't do the dredging right, there are wildlife endangered species issues, there are fish habitat issues, there are moving contamination from the mill pond into the lake or vice versa. So there are all these things that we have to worry about while we're doing the work. So we need to do a study up front to make sure that we know exactly what the best processes are for handling the mill pond here.
All our grant writing is done in-house, right?
No, it's done in a combination between Brandon, Dustin, and I.
That's in-house.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important for the citizens to know that they are getting grant writing included in what they get from their city staff. And it's important because if we didn't do the grant writing, we'd be paying all that money off of taxes. So
The one of the issues that we have on this week's agenda is the remedial action plan for the CPN Corporation. And the city is going to fund $185,000 to finalize the DNR's requirements for environmental cleanup on the site. So we will be doing the capping of the hot spots, and we will do the final year of groundwater testing and vapor testing in the buildings. And then once that's done, it'll be removed from the DNR's cleanup sites. So we're hoping that we can get that done in the next year. That's on the council agenda next week.
and that should help to bring in some businesses to go into those places.
It should make it more attractive to redevelopment. I'm not.
Will you explain where that is
That's 621 East Lake Street, which is across the street from Hamlin.
It's the old north plan of CP. That's why it's CPM.
Don't go back as far as we do.
I feel like I go back to 1910 after looking at all those maps.
And it's right,
Yeah,
and it's right before you get to the creek.
yep, on the north side of the street.
See where the creek goes under the road on Lake Street? It's the land between Ryan's, Carter, and the creek. Yeah.
We're,
For development there,
n-
on that property, or not yet?
no, there isn't. We've had interest off and on. Some of the environmental issues have been the problem. So that's what's motivated us to go ahead and fund the cleanup ourselves. The property owners are actually the ones that are responsible for it, but from a redevelopment standpoint and an environmental protection standpoint, it has public benefits, and so the city council is going to use TID number 3 funds to fund the cleanup and hopefully make it more readily available for development. I know that we've had a couple businesses interested, but that's been an issue. We're also doing Elm Street this year. 2 years ago, we did Birch Street from Pine to Tyrannita Park Road. This year, we're going to do Elm Street, which is from Pine Street to Tyrannita Park Road, but on the west side of Maine rather than the east. And it will come out between the new Culvers and the cemetery on Tyrannita Park Road. And that should start as soon in April as we can possibly get it going. And that involves water, sewer, stormwater streets, sidewalks, and a stormwater retention basin. The other big project this year is going to be East Lake Park Place. And we are going to rebuild the street completely, so it'll be all new base, all new pavement, sidewalks, curb and gutter, and it will have a stormwater system large enough to handle South Main Street. So it won't have any ditches anymore, but we'll have a pipe, and it will have a small bio-retention basin at the far east end of the fish hatchery on the north side of East Lake Park Place.
Are there plans to extend East Lake Park Place any further east than it already is?
Not at this time.
I would agree with that. Would we like to? Yes. Are we planning it right now? No.
We've got our hands a little full at the moment.
Yeah, a little bit. But there are plans at some point in some decades to go further east.
Yes. I shouldn't say that. As long as the golf course is there, it's unlikely.
It's not on the council priority list at this point, but, you know, that, things change. I mean, what I tell you today might be different tomorrow because some other thing comes through, but it's not something we're discussing with any fervor at this moment.
But
Well, I want to say something about Lake Park Place, too. When Lake Park Place was, and I think it's before I came here, you can probably answer the question, but it was never built like a street. I don't know even, was it a cow path once upon a time or something? It was a road that kind of went in because people wanted to drive down it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there was never a base under it that was of any, you know, it wasn't built like a road. So this would be the first real building of Lake Park Place, doing it the way a road should be built. Am I, now, correct what I said if I'm wrong.
well, it is a road. It's not built to a standard that you would build a regular street. So, you know, when when we talk to the council and we tell them, well, it's not really a road, we're looking at it and saying, well, there should be 12 inches of this, and there should be 6 inches of this, and there should be 3.5 inches of this, and there should be a 3-inch crown, and the shoulders should be done this way. And really, why would you have a rural cross section which has no curb and gutter and sidewalk and have ditches? Because that just takes up more room. It makes it more difficult to maintain. You know, those ditches are nothing but a hazard from a standpoint here. And then when you're looking at it from a city management standpoint, you would say that road wasn't built to a city standard for street. It just kind of, probably what happened is they pushed out a little bit of gravel over what had been traveled on and laid asphalt. And so if you look at it, it's just cracked up like what we call alligator cracked all the way. And that's because it flexes. And with that much flexing on it, it has to crack. And a street with a good base under it wouldn't do that. And if it had curb and gutter at the edges, the curb and gutter provides a substantial amount of support to that pavement, and so it flexes less. And so you get less of that type of activity. So when we look at going in and fixing a street, that's what we try and do. We try and push a street to a minimum, an asphalt street, which we call a flexible pavement, with a concrete curb. We try and get that into a minimum of a 25-year life. And then if you do it right, you can extend that to maybe somewhere between 55 and 65 years. And that's I'm going to say it's a lot of new research that's coming down. It's not true. It's been out for about 15 years, but the validation of the information is now coming down, saying that there are certain features of road maintenance. I don't know if you remember when County Highway V, they had just laid that brand new asphalt, and like 3 years later they came in and oil and chipped over it, and everybody was like, are you out of your minds? Why are you throwing this rock on a brand new asphalt pavement? Well, that study proves that if you do that, you've just added another 7 years onto that 25, so now you're at 32. And if you come back a couple years later and you do it again, you've added another 7 years. And eventually you can push that out so that, and the analysis proves out that you can cut $1 million off of a piece of roadway like that by doing that type of maintenance, considering the additional cost of the oil and chip on a regular basis. So there's all this new data that's coming in where people are now doing things that we would have thought were absolutely crazy 15 years ago. And so we look at that, and so when we're looking at the initial construction and the long-term maintenance, we try and tie all those together. So when we looked at how East Lake Park Place was going to be constructed, we take all that into consideration. You know, how's the base set up? How's the pavement? How's the curb and gutter? When's the first time we're going to do the oil and chip? What are the conditions that are going to be in place for that? And the other thing we have is our comprehensive plan, and our transportation plan requires us to look at complete streets. So we're going to look at a street, you know, that how the traffic flows on it, what type of traffic demand. So it's at a school, the pedestrian traffic, the types of bike traffic that's going to be on it, what other things, parades. So those are conditions that we have to evaluate when we're looking at it. What we want to do in our street programs is 43 feet would be as wide a street as we ever want to see in Lake Mills. Well, how do you do that? Well, that means you have to have a lot of alternate streets available for people to use. If every street funnels them to one street, then all of a sudden all the traffic that's traveling through Lake Mills has to travel on South Main Street. Now you're at 4, 5, 6 lane streets as you continue to grow. If you have more options, and people have more options to pick which street they're going to and how it comes together, then there's less chance that they're all going to go to one street, and we can keep it narrower. That allows that street to be easier to cross for kids going to schools. So if you're crossing South Main Street to go to Lake Mills Elementary School, you don't want to have to cross 5 lanes. It's bad enough now with 3. So those are things that you want to look at and evaluate as you're going through, and that's the choice that the council made in their transportation plan and what they look forward to putting forward. And then they want safe places for the kids to walk, and so you got sidewalks and curbs protect the edges of the street. They also protect the pedestrians. They give you a nice outline of the area. They control stormwater. So those are all things that we look at when we do a street like East Lake Park Place. We also look at the water and the sewer. The water on East Lake Park Place is not that old. It might be one where we would wait maybe another 20 years, but the stormwater on South Main Street is pushing the reconstruction along with the condition of the pavement and the sidewalks. So we're going to replace the water main now so that we don't have to tear up the brand new pavement in a couple of years to put the water main down, because the water main needs to be gone from a 6-inch to a 10-inch in order to provide the adequate fire supply demanded by a school that size. Right now that's an issue.
I think the athletic fields that have been put in recent years had increased in hazards on East Lake Park Place. And really, there is a need for a sidewalk and everything else. If any of you want to take a look when there's an athletic event going on in one of those fields, come on down about 5 or 5:30. I've seen it, I shuddered.
What have you seen?
I've seen people zipping down there to try and pick up their kids, and they got to get home so they get the supper on and so forth.
Oh, it's like a
Yeah,
raceway?
it's a mess. It's a mess.
And there are kids popping in and out from both sides, and they're walking on the street rather than...
There's no sidewalk down for part of it. So I think that that's a project that needs to be done.
I just want to give a little, along with Bill, some of the history too. Lake Park Place has been talked about. My first time on the council was the late 80s, and then in the 90s. Every time I was on council, Lake Park Place came up to talk about it. Are we going to do it now? And now is when we really need to do it because of the South Main Street project. It ties in directly with that. It's not cheap to do a road. And that one of the reasons we didn't do it sooner is because of the amount of land for the school district, amount of land for the DNR, and just, it's just, we were trying to help, especially the school district, not have a big bill, but yet, you gotta pay for what you have. Now, it's not a question of whether we should do it, it's like we have to do it if we're going to do a decent job in tie-in with the rest of the systems and,
Right.
so it's, that's.
And
why-
we gave them plenty of notice, so they
Oh,
were
yeah.
prepared, and we gave them, we allowed them to set up their system in a fashion that met their needs, so.
But I mean, we've had people over the years say, well, why haven't you put sidewalks there? Well, because it isn't that simple. You can't just put sidewalks in, it goes along with the big picture. And now there will be sidewalks there and so forth. But we're sorry it took so long, but there were good reasons for taking this long to do it.
One of the other projects we're doing this year is lining the sanitary sewer on Water Street. And in 2004, we implemented our sanitary sewer plan, and one of the features is that we ran a new main down Lake Street that replaced the main on Water Street, with the idea that at this point in time, both North and South Main Street could drain into that, and there would be plenty of capacity. But when we redid South Main Street, the one on Lake Street would handle the north side of the city, and the one on Water Street would handle the south side. Well, the one on Water Street has great capacity right now, but it's old enough that the way to bring it up to standard is to line it. So this year we're going to line the sanitary sewer on Water Street from Grove to Main. Not quite all the way to Main, because it ends about in front of the Frontier building there, but we'll do a lot of work there.
Steve, was there any conclusion from your 3-hour meeting where people on South Main or those folks that were interested in trees, Rob, as long as you're here? Is there anything that you came out of that meeting with?
Well, I think the meeting was set up primarily for information for the individuals. There's a lot of information out there that is false. From my standpoint, being the city forester and an arborist, not only did I look at it with our engineers, how the trees are being impacted by the actual road, but when you start evaluating the trees and realize we have 109 trees that are city terrace trees going up and down that street, there's a high percent that are not very good trees to begin with. So you start taking those out of the equation, and then you throw a road project on top of that. And that's a major road project. Not only are we doing the street, which now we're cutting the curb line back, that impacts the tree root system. We're doing a wider sidewalk, which we have to do to state and federal standards now, which is a little bit different than city standard. So that needs to be dug even deeper. So now we're impacting a root system going towards the residential property. Along with that, we're doing all the utilities. Now, you're running the utilities across the terraces. So not only are we disturbing, let's say north and south on each side of the tree, now the east and west on sides of the trees are being impacted. So any of the root systems growing down the terrace itself are being cut off too. So we are impacting four sides, but most likely the trees.
The east and west utilities are the laterals. So the water and sewer are actually running north and south down South Main Street, but then we have to run the water and sewer to your house. That means that we have to run east and west up to the property line, and so now you have this curb here and the sidewalk here and the water and the sewer here, and that tree is in about a space that's 6 inches by 6 inches.
And by the time you take into account, you have your sewer, your water, your gas lines, we have light poles going in, we have fire hydrants, and you also have all the driveway aprons along there. I mean, that's a lot of things cutting up those tree terraces. Now you take some of these trees out there, there's not a lot of space for them to be left. Yeah. In worst case scenario, we try to leave these trees, we're going to be coming back in the future, in the near future, and having to do removal. I'm going to be getting the phone call saying, you have these trees dying out there, they're dropping limbs on Main Street, they're dropping in my yard, please get the tree out of here. I've seen that on other road projects. One is North Main Street. It was back when I first started here, North Main Street had just gotten done. They left quite a few of those trees up, and in the course of the last 18 years, we've taken down many trees along North Main Street that should have been taken down in the road project. Now, if we would have replanted at that point, those trees would have 18 years worth of growth on them.
The other issue is that North Main Street did not do water and sewer. So there wasn't any east-west laterals being cut in, and there were no deep cuts in the street. When we looked at South Main Street, and you noted that we were down to 16 trees that were unimpacted by the north-south construction, but when we got done with the east-west construction, those trees were totally impacted. And our insurance company, once you cut roots off on all four sides, that tree is a hazard, and your insurance company says you know that. And that at that point, they want us to take that tree out. And so there's no way we would reasonably leave any of those trees in there. So that was why we planned right up front to replace them in some form or fashion. That's changed over the course of the project. We originally were looking at planting them in the yards. Now we're going to plant one in the yard and leave that at property owners, and we're going to plant some trees in the terrace based on the ability to locate. But we'll replace a lot of trees. The other thing we should talk about is he talked about terrace trees, which are between the sidewalk and the curb. There were 168 trees total, so 79 of them are on residential property.
Closer to 60.
Okay.
60, I believe.
So if you have 60 properties, 60 trees on residential property, we don't have anything to do with that, but they have the same condition technically happening to their trees that we have to our trees. And that is that that sidewalk is going to cut off a certain percentage of roots, that water service is going to cut off a certain percentage of roots, that sanitary sewer is going to cut off a certain percentage of roots. Rob says 20% root damage has a substantial impact, 40% is surely going to kill a tree.
A tree with about 20% of root loss, it isn't really going to show signs. Once it starts getting over the 20%, you're going to start seeing the decline of the tree. But once you get to that 40, 50%, that's when you're looking at most likely death of the tree. Now, a residential tree up on the property won't have the impact like a terrace tree because you're not working on all four sides of it. Okay, you're obviously working on the sidewalk side of the tree, but if they're not having any laterals run to their house, they're not impacting either side of it, and on the house side, there's going to be absolutely no work. So on a residence up there that is not having any laterals run to the household, actually 3/4 of the root system is not even going to be disturbed, and depending on how far away from the sidewalk that tree is, it may have minimal impact even on the sidewalk side.
When we run the water and sewer laterals in, we put it to the property line. In order to be able to connect to an existing water service, we have to dig 5 feet back. So several of those trees are just at the back edge of them. So there are a substantial number of those trees that will impact it on both sides. And that's if we only go to the property line. The reason we have to go that far is because when you tie to the existing one, we replace everything. So we have to be able to pull your service up, connect it to the valve, and then connect it to ours. So there's a certain amount of distance you need to be able to work in there. So if those trees are real close, and they're,
Real close?
Real
yeah,
close to
if
the
they're,
sidewalk.
they are going to be substantially impacted. And I would be concerned, if they're in that 5-foot range, I would be concerned. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation will buy the temporary limited easements. They will probably compensate for tree loss. But you have the right to say, no, I don't want compensation, I want my tree left. But I would seriously consider what that long-term option is, because some of those trees are huge, and the cost of replacing those can be pretty substantial.
Well, then if the tree stays and a limb comes down going by, then who is responsible for that? Is that
That's the homeowner, yeah. Once they've waived that right to have that tree taken down, they become responsible. And I didn't even look at that. I mean, I looked at, because most people are just going to think it was an act of God. They're not going to consider that there was a construction there. But some of those trees could be, what, $3,000 to take down?
Oh, yeah. Where during the road project, they're taking down, in essence, free to the homeowner. Or the DOT may offer them some sort of a payment for the tree, where if they leave the tree stand and 5 years down the road, the tree is declining to the point where they need to have it removed. Yeah, it may cost the homeowner thousands of dollars then to have the tree removed.
Plus,
And
then
that'll be on their dime, not on the city's dime.
Plus, then they're going to want to buy a new tree. At this point in time, they could take it out, they get the money for it, they would have the money, the tree would be taken down for them, and they would have enough money to buy a new tree. Those are things you need to be able to weigh and balance. And I'm saying you have to do it. I mean, it's up to the property owners, but those are things that I don't know that people will consider seriously when they're there. If I were there, and I were advising you, I would say consider all your options.
When it's time to start taking down trees and talking to the homeowners, do you think you might have like a sheet with pros and cons and, what you would save by doing this now versus what you would spend? Some kind of a visual, sometimes people need a visual.
We don't do the negotiations.
Oh.
So we will not be involved, and they have to follow state standards, so I don't know what that'll be.
Okay. The DOT is actually going to be doing all the negotiations?
We have a consultant who does it, and they have to follow the DNR rules. So we couldn't just use anybody. We can't even just use a regular RFP, a request for proposals. We got to use the state's request for proposals. They have to be certified on the WISDOT for right-of-way acquisition consultants, and they have to use all their paperwork, and they have to follow all their details, and they have to ask them how much money they can offer and what kind of conditions. There are a certain number of things that you look at. You're gonna get your offer, you're gonna sign the deed, and then there's a thing that you can ask for, which is a construction engineer's statement. They aren't going to offer this to you necessarily, but you can ask for it. And this says, these are the conditions I want after you're done. So you could say, like the one person, I want all the materials from my retaining wall saved and put back in. They could say, when this tree is taken out, I want to restore it in this form. So those are things that you want to continue to follow along in the negotiations. But from our standpoint, we won't have a lot of that. When we come in and we start taking the city terrace trees out, we will work with the homeowners to pick a new tree that they can plant in their yard if they want to. And Rob will work with them on that, and we prefer to have it be a big tree, and the sooner they get it in, the better. Now, I know Rob's on a timeline, and we don't have a lot of empty space, and there's certain times when it's best to plant trees. So if we're working hard this spring to take out a certain number of particular trees, and he's starting to work with you over the summer as to what tree you want to have put back in, you should start working with Rob. Hopefully in the fall or the next spring he can get that tree in, and you'll have a year or two of growth on it before the construction project starts. And then we can kind of have some trees replaced before the project starts, because otherwise all the trees in the terrace are going to be gone until 2019. So if we can get some in the front yard, and they will be the property owner's trees, they aren't going to be ours, but we'll give you a tree and we'll install it. We'll help you figure out where to put it so that it'll survive the construction.
Is the plan still to do flowering trees on the tree lawn?
On the tree lawn, we're still doing a decorative type of approach. What kind of trees are we looking at?
Most of your flowering type trees are serviceberry, crabapple, pears, lilac, that type of thing. Once we understand where light poles, fire hydrants, everything on that street's going, then we can come up with a replanting plan. To say a tree's going to be every 40 feet or whatever it is, we won't play into that. Because as soon as we start doing that, darn well we're going to have one right next to a light pole.
Right.
So we're better off waiting to see where all this other stuff lays out on the street, and then we'll come back and do that type of planting. But the residential trees, we can at least get working with them, getting things planted back on there. So you can see the number of trees that are going to be going back in there. I mean, not only is there going to be a lot of trees, but that's a lot of work to be getting that much trees. So it's not just going to be a simple come in one spring or one fall and take care of planting all these trees. That's going to be a little bit of time to take care of that. And also the removal of all those trees. That's roughly 100-some trees to be removed. You just don't come in overnight and do that.
So you're doing that, the removal in stages?
We are going to hopefully start, if we get the okay from the DOT, start doing the removals yet this summer. We haven't got the okay to do anything on that street yet. But once they do, we'll start systematically taking down trees, hopefully working with the homeowners that want trees replaced, and getting that taken care of, and then just trying to, in the next 3 years, get it taken care of. And at some point, we may have to have a contractor come in and help us. Because on top of that work, we obviously have all our other parks and forestry work. None of our other work goes away. This is additional to that.
I was just wondering if you were going to have enough people to work.
We'll work at it and see where we get, and at some point, we just may have to have a contractor come in and give us a hand.
And we have to worry about bats?
You said bats.
Yes, yeah. Part of the problem is when we can remove trees has to do with, there's a bat in the trees. Is that still on, or has that been removed?
Do bats live in trees?
Dustin,
Yeah.
Dustin is keeping us kind of informed of that. That keeps changing on a monthly basis.
Yeah, there's an endangered bat species that you can't remove trees after a certain period in the summertime. And that also restricts us.
Well, we have to look at that too. It may just be for entire clearing. We can probably systematically take trees out of
Okay.
area. I mean, we have to do some on South Main Street. We've let them go so long. We do have dead trees standing on South Main. They have to get out of there as soon as possible. We do have some hazardous situations out there. And we do have, I
Ash.
believe, 17 ash trees along South Main Street where, you know, if you're keeping up emerald ash borer, we do have it in the area. So it's just a matter of time before all our ash tree population is dead. So that's the species of tree we like to get, you know, taken care of. So there are things we can do, even with the bat situation, that I need to do to keep the community safe. And so we will be doing some throughout the summer. Once fall hits, I hope to be able to amp that up a little bit. But in the next winter, it all depends. We have a snowy winter and we're constantly out doing snow removal.
Right.
That's less time to be able to go do tree work. If we get a real cold winter, well, everybody likes the ice rink, so we're spending more time making ice. So, you know, it's kind of a weigh and balance and see what the weather does for us.
As far as the flowering and fruit trees in the tree yard, I know fruit trees take a lot of maintenance. Is that going to be done by the homeowner or is that done by the city?
The trees that are planted in the terrace remain city property and will be maintained by the city. The trees that are planted on the residence side of the sidewalk become the property and responsibility of the homeowner.
But the city will take care of whatever maintenance these new trees
Correct.
require because it may be a little more.
Right.
You're trying to get species that aren't heavy on dropping,
Correct.
you know,
They're more of a decorative type fruit.
They don't
It's not,
produce a big fruit population, it's more flower and.
right, they will produce, say, a crab apple or a small pear, but the birds usually eat those. When I talk about pear tree, you know, it's not the edible eating pear.
So don't make.
Well, we have, no,
We've had requests
these,
for those.
these species of trees we already plant within the city and have been doing it since I've been here for 18 years. So you already have them along the streets.
And we're also going to be planting them, you know, not like one straight line of this tree and one straight line of that tree, because we never know what kind of infestation can come down the road. We didn't expect emerald ash borer. We didn't expect Dutch-elm disease when it came through. So we're going to do different species, different varieties, so if something does come through, we might lose that kind of tree, but it won't be a whole block that has nothing. You know, I don't think that kind of...
And we've been doing that since I've been here. Plant diversity.
That's the word. Couldn't think of it.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we had discussed at the meeting was about more city trees in the yards. But we looked at, and I think that, you know, a lot of tall trees planted by us in the yard will conflict with the tree lawn, and we'll lose our investment in the tree lawn. And the other one is that the property owners are probably going to get a pretty substantial payment for any trees that they lose as part of the project. And they'll certainly have enough money to plant their own trees. So if they want to plant trees in their front yard, they're more than welcome to.
And I think part of the question was, will the city, even if we pay the city to come in and do additional planting, you got to realize that's even more additional work that's now put on our back to go and do. You know, so I think at that point, if we do at least 8 planting for every lot along there, then the homeowner can do the remainder of what he would like in his own yard, I guess, on his own, you know, company-owned time, and do that. I don't know if the city needs to have more work burden put on our backs to do it.
And I'm just going to do a plug again for anybody to remember that if you're going to do some digging, you call Digger's Hotline 3 days before. It costs you nothing, but it could save your life. And, you know, any kind of digging, you just don't always know where those lines are.
It'll also help you pick a good location for the tree, because you don't want to plant a tree over the top of them.
Any other topic that somebody was hoping to bring up that you haven't heard yet?
All right. Thank you.